Okay, por fin. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I'm really excited for the event that's about to take place. My name is Melanie, and I'm the community organizer for Effective Altruism Barcelona. And today we're putting on this event in collaboration with Adevinta Spain. And I just wanted to explain the sequence of events so that everything's clear, because there's quite a few changes going on. First, Didac will speak briefly about Adevinta. Then Pablo will speak about Effective Altruism Barcelona. And then our first speaker, Adria, will connect online from California. All of our speakers are from Barcelona, but they're not all physically here, unfortunately. So Adria will talk about AI safety direct from California. Then Guillem, who we have in person, will speak about AI governance. And then at the end, our third speaker, Martin, will address those two talks and open the Q&A. We'll have the Q&A, and then that will be the conclusion of the event, of the formalities, and then everybody is invited to go to the foyer to have some pizzas and drinks, which are complimentary. So hopefully that all makes sense. There'll be a bit of logistics and on the screen and off the screen, but it should all work fine. So Didac, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Welcome here. My name is Didac Fortuny. I am data scientist here in Adevinta, Spain. And I would like to welcome you here to the Adevinta auditorium. And just before starting, I would like to give a few words about what is Adevinta and what we do. And for this reason, I will explain very briefly our purpose, our mission, and our vision. The purpose of Adevinta is make a positive change in the world by helping everything and everyone find a new purpose. How we want to do this? By creating perfect matches in the world's most trusted marketplaces or web portals. And why we want to do this is because we strongly believe that sustainable commerce is crucial in shaping a healthy planet and also a healthy society. So for the reason also, circular economy is part of our key behaviors in Adevinta, of our key values. And for the reason as well, we have been awarded as a sustainability leader in Europe. Adevinta runs several marketplaces or web portals in many countries, mainly in Europe and also in America. In particular, in Spain, we are present in the real estate sector with Fotocasa and Habitaclia. Also in the jobs sector with InfoJobs. We are present in the mobility area with Cochesnet and Moteosnet, and we also run the second-hand marketplace Mil Anuncios. And as I told you, one of the key ingredients of our mission is this matchmaking, and we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve this matchmaking. But also, as I showed you in the previous slide, with Fotocasa, with InfoJobs, we are present in key moments of people's lives. So when they are looking for a new home or when they are looking for a new job. So we have a strong responsibility in terms of not having biases, not having any discrimination against anyone, because the impact of our work is huge. So, for example, the European Union with the AI Act is telling us that the access to employment will be a high-risk application of artificial intelligence, and we are in InfoJobs, we are aware of that, and that's why we have to work a lot to make sure that our algorithms doesn't have bias and doesn't leave anyone out of the system. But not only because the European Union is telling us that we have to do this, we also believe that our system has to be inclusive and do not have biases. So that's why we, in the last years, we have been working on this. For example, we ensure gender neutrality in the InfoJobs searcher for example, when you look in the searcher, director de marketing or directora de marketing, both are the male and the female forms of marketing director. The results that you get are the same. This is thanks to a machine learning algorithm that is behind the searcher, and it is able to classify everything and say, okay, director and directora is the same, so we will give you exactly the same results. We also don't want to just use black box models to give you what you want without telling you why we think that you want this. So that's why when we tell you that an offer, a job offer, would be relevant for you, we tell the reasons why we think that this is relevant for you. This way you can just not just see which are your points that you have to improve to reach that offer, but also you can tell us whether we are assuming something wrong, and then we can make an action to solve this. And finally, it's quite obvious, but we don't use any sensitive data like age and gender explicitly in our algorithms, in any artificial intelligence algorithm. But because we know that even though we don't use these sensitive data features in our algorithms, have some biases in the AI projects. We are participating in the Find HR project. It's an European project that is conducted by the Universitat Pompeu Fabra, but it's a lot of partners in Europe and other universities are participating. And the goal of this project is to first detect biases in the recruitment processes based on AI, and also suggest things to mitigate these biases. And also we are collaborating with legal teams and external audit companies to make sure that our algorithms do not have any bias and do not discriminate anyone. Well, that's all about Adevinta. If you want to know more about the company or about the how we use AI, just contact me. I will be there at the end of the session and we can talk further. Melanie, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Didac. Thanks. Okay, so now, again, very briefly, Pablo will just speak about what is Effective Altruism Barcelona, because this is an event put on by Adevinta and also Effective Altruism Barcelona. So he's just going to explain that right now. Pablo, by the way, is the principal data scientist at Our World in Data, and he recently gave a talk in Adevinta about climate change and data on climate change. And he's also the co-organizer, along with myself, of Effective Altruism Barcelona.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. I think very often we ask ourselves, how can we make the world a better place? And very often we believe that we're just too small and the problems are too big, or we just don't know what to do, which is fair enough because it's not trivial and it's very complicated to know what to do to make the world a better place. For example, you heard that there are a lot of people that die around the world from preventable diseases, and you want to do something about it. What can you do? One thing you can do is donate money to some charity, but which charity? Not all charities have the same impact. Some charities actually have a much bigger impact per euro that you donate. So it makes sense to donate to charities that are the most cost effective. So that's one thing that you can do to have an impact. With your money, you can actually donate to effective charities, but that's not the whole picture. You can do other things. For example, with your career, you can also have a big impact and make the world better. You can decide what to study or how to steer your career in a direction to have a larger impact. Or you can also, if you work in a company, you can also help take decisions that are going to, for example, have a smaller environmental impact, or decide how to spend resources, money of the company, to have a better positive impact. And you can also use your free time and do effective volunteering in areas that you can actually help because you have skills to do something about it. So you may be wondering, okay, those things sound good, but still I don't know how to start. Luckily, there is a a big community of people that have been thinking about these topics for a while, and it's called effective altruism. So effective altruism is a global community and a research field that aims to find the best ways to help others and put them in practice. And one important thing is that you not only want to do good, but you want to do the most good given your limited resources. I mentioned before that one of the topics that that effective altruism cares about is global health and poverty, but there are many other topics that are often discussed. For example, animal welfare, or mental health, or pandemics, biosecurity, which careers have a bigger impact, and the topic that brought us all here today, artificial intelligence. And why that? Well, if you think about it, you can have a big impact today, and you can donate money to save lives of people and animals today, but there are many other lives ahead of us in the future. And we all have heard about climate change. We are aware that if we mitigate climate change as much as we can now, we're gonna save lives in the future, and we are gonna make future lives better. But we may not be aware that a misaligned artificial intelligence can also have a very negative impact in future lives. So that's something that is often a topic of discussion in effective altruism. And if you are interested about it, there is a lot of people around the world that have joined some local group of effective altruists. There is, it started in the UK, but now it's all around the world. For example, at the beginning of the year, we had a conference in Mexico, and it was the first one in a Latin American country. And there are many others. And here in Barcelona, we have also a small but growing group. And we meet at least once a month, and we have workshops, we give talks, and we just meet for social events every now and then. So if you're interested to learn and talk about how you can have a big impact and want to talk about these kinds of issues with other people that also care about having a big impact, then join the community. So you can scan this code and you will find a lot of resources there, or simply ask me after this event. Thank you very much.
My own? Yes. Thank you, Pablo. So we've talked about what is Adevinta Spain. We've talked about effective altruism. Now let's get to the point. The reason you're all here is that we want to learn about AI, the risks involved, and how it can be governed. So I'm just going to present the three speakers. I just need my cheat sheet, mi chuleta. Un segundo. Where is the clicker? Okay, so the first speaker today is Adrià Garriga Alonso. Okay, Dr. Adrià Garriga Alonso. Oh, he's saying hi. Okay, hi.
Hola.
Don't speak yet, just wait a second.
Okay. Sorry.
Dr. Adrià Garriga Alonso has a PhD in machine learning from the University of Cambridge, a master's in computer science from the University of Oxford, and a bachelor in computer science from Universitat Pompeu Fabra, just around the corner. He's currently working on deep learning interpretability research at FAR AI in California, and his goal is to prevent existential risk from AI. Welcome, Adrià. You're not speaking yet. I'm just going to introduce the other two speakers, and then you speak.
Okay.
Vale?
Thank you.
Vale. Our second speaker, who we have in person, is Guillem Bas. Guillem has a master's in security and technology from the National School of Political Science and Public Administration, and a bachelor in international relations from Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Right now, he's responsible for policy transfer at Riesgos Catastróficos Globales, and his main area of interest is the governance of AI in the near and long-term future. And finally, Martin Soto, that we might be able to see in a second. Oh, there, the guy down the bottom, that's Martin. Martin Soto is connecting from Prague today. He has a master's in pure and applied logic from the University of Barcelona and a double bachelor in mathematics and physics from the same university. He's an independent researcher in AI alignment focused on reducing suffering risks and has collaborated with the Machine Intelligence Research Institute and the Center on Long-Term Risk. Together, our three speakers will present a compelling case for possibly the most urgent dilemma of our time. How can we effectively govern artificial intelligence? Adria, over to you.
Moltes gràcies, Mel. Hello, everyone. I'm Adria, and hopefully I will be able to show my slide. So today's talk is not going to be very technical. I am just going to present a basic case for AI risk. And hopefully you all can see my slides now. All right, lovely. Yeah, so existential risk from AI. One version of it is that it's just very hard to control something that's more intelligent than you, that can think ahead and outsmart you in various ways and think faster. And anyways, in my view, there are two kinds of AI existential risk. One kind is accident risk, which is what I just talked about, that the AI, despite the intentions of its makers, takes over and does something. And for this, there could be technical solutions, but also governance solutions, which are the focus of this whole session, are useful and possible. And then the other kind of risk is malicious risk or risk of misuse. So AI can also be viewed as a very powerful tool. And someone can use AI to cause a lot of destruction in some way by imbuing it into autonomous weapons, or AI maybe convinces people, I don't know, via disinformation campaigns or something, to start a destructive war or prop up totalitarian regimes. You know, you think it's bad nowadays if your neighbor in North Korea can surveil you and check what you're up to, and check that you're not a traitor to the Kim family. But it's even worse when every computer is hosting a language model that is monitoring all your communications and reporting on the same. So it could be, it's bad, but it could be much worse, guys. That's my point here. Yeah. So in this talk, I'm going to focus mostly on accident risk. Not necessarily because I think it's the most likely or relevant, though I think it is quite likely, but because it's the one that can have technical solutions, and it's the one that I've been working on. So the main argument, in my view, for existential risk from accident is the second species argument. And it goes like this. This is taken from Richard No's work. It is likely that we will soon develop AI more intelligent than we are, perhaps by a lot. Also, this AI will have long-term goals that it wants to accomplish. And these goals will not be exactly the same as our goals. And in order to enact these goals, the AI will gain control of humanity's future and do what it wants. And I will attempt to make the case for these 4 propositions in this talk. So let's start. Well, a summary of this argument, and like the reason it's named the second species argument is the chimpanzee. Chimpanzees are very smart. They are the closest living relative species to humans, so they're very similar to us. But instead of being all over the globe, they are an endangered species. And they even have better short-term memory than we do, some scientists say. And despite all of these things, they are not in control of their future. The reason chimpanzees exist nowadays is because we care about them somewhat, and we take pains to ensure that their habitat does not get encroached by other humans and whatnot. But, you know, we don't care about them that much, or at least we, like, that's the reason they're still endangered, or we don't care about them more than other endangered species, really. So even despite our best intentions, it is still the case that chimpanzees are not in control of their future, and humans are in control of chimpanzees' future, which is maybe okay by us, but it's pretty bad for chimpanzees. So the thrust of this argument is that we don't want the same to happen to humans. We don't want AI to be the one that is in control of our future. Okay, so first likely we will make AI that is more intelligent than us. So the first possible way you can argue this is by recursive self-improvement. So you start with an AI that is close to as smart as a human, and we've painstakingly coded it to be this good, and then because it's as good as a human, it is able to reason about the science that is involved in its making, and then make a slightly better version of itself that is faster, smarter, or whatever. And then that version can, again, understand all the science and improve some things and create the next version of itself, and so on until the AI is much, much smarter than humans, much faster. I encountered this version of the argument in about 2015, and I think the specifics of it are wrong, because it's not necessarily the case that the AI is going to have great introspection access to itself, and maybe it's just able to train other deep learning models or whatever, but they might not be aligned with itself for the same reason that they're not aligned with us, and so it might not want to do that. But the general thrust that improved technology in machine learning lets you improve technology in machine learning even faster is still true. So nowadays already, we are using machine learning techniques to search for better optimizers that make the neural networks train faster, for better architectures. And very importantly, recently, we've started to have things that help us to write code faster and more correctly. And I think very soon, in a couple of years at most, we'll have language models, or at least the leading companies will have language models that run machine learning experiments for them autonomously. So even the lowliest engineer intern has as much underlings at their disposal as a current university professor does. So this is going to greatly accelerate progress, and this is without the AI purposefully improving itself. So I think the conceptual argument is sound, and recent trends have vindicated this proposition that we're going to make AI that is smarter than us. Okay. Proposition 2 that I want to argue for is that the AI has long-term goals. And the reason that this is true is that even if it has short-term goals, having long-term goals is instrumentally useful for securing these and making sure that they continue to happen. For example, even if you just like eating good food, which is a very short-term gratification thing, it is useful to plan ahead so that you have the ways to acquire more food in the future. And yeah, I think the main thrust of the argument in the past was that we would get AI from competitive reinforcement learning agents that play games. And that's a very sad way to get AI for the purpose of existential risk, because you will get AIs that are completely alien to humans, do not know what humans want, do not care what humans want. And they're just trying to enact their plan at whatever, in whatever way is the best. Sorry, these days we've started to see a lot of progress on AI from language models that learn to mimic humans, which might be a cause for hope, because just by mimicking humans, if you're having to mimic humans a lot, you're more likely to understand why they want. You are also somewhat more likely to care, and you are less likely to be a super rational reasoner that plans in the long term and only cares about the ends. But we are reintroducing planning with reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is an alignment technique. So it's not clear where this is going to go. Yes. The next point I want to make is that the AI's goals likely are not the same as ours. And to this, I want to point out that there's an enormous space of possible goals that the AI could have. And it's unlikely that we'll find the exact one that we want it to have and be able to encode it in, kind of like this compass over here. And in a more mundane analogy, parents and children do not want the same things. And in this case, this is not bad because the parents want the child to be happy. But if what the child then wants is to take over and end up killing the parents, maybe we do take an issue with that. So you might object to this, that the AI is super intelligent. Surely it understands what our goals are, and it understands what is good and what is bad. But my rejoinder to this is, would it care? I buy that it will understand it perfectly, but why should it care about doing what we think is good? And the key technical difficulty here is to point to the concept space inside the AI's head and say, this is good, and we want you to care about this, and give it this as its objective that it's training for. So this is pretty complicated. And here is my argument for proposition 4, that the AI will gain control of humanity's future if all these three things are true. So if the AI is more intelligent than us and has long-term goals that are not quite the same as ours, it will gain control of humanity's future, because this way it can do what it wants. It can fulfill its goals, which are not the same as ours. So if it didn't have control, we would prevent it from doing its goals. So we are preventing this poor chimpanzee in captivity from, going around in the wild like it probably wants to do. How might the AI gain control of humanity's future? I see two main ways. One way is persuasion. So it has to convince people to give it more power by appealing to people's wants, lying, threatening, appearing to be useful until you take over. And this guy over here did not have to be super intelligent to basically take over a country and kill millions and millions of people. And another way that the AI could gain control of humanity's future is by hacking out of its computer and spreading around various computer systems that are interconnected and starting to become more intelligent with the recursive self-improving procedure that way, or persuade more people or whatever. And this is maybe also worrying because AI is already superhuman at coding in some respects. For example, GPT-4, which is not that smart in the grand scheme of things, is already able to draw pictures with code without any interactivity, just by drawing just by outputting the text directly, without editing, without interaction, anything. And probably it did this under a minute, whereas it would take someone at least 5 minutes to make a picture like this with text, this latex programming thing, by interacting with the code, rendering it, seeing what it outputs, tweaking it a little bit. But no, GPT-4 did it immediately. So I find it very likely that it'll just, next iterations will just be much better than people at coding in some ways, and it'll be able to brute force the rest just by trying lots of times to get things working. So what do we do about these things? If you're convinced that we're likely to build super intelligent AI and it's likely to take over because it will have different goals, what can you do? Well, one thing you can do, which is what I've been doing about this, but not that well, so please don't think that I've got everything covered, is technical research. So we can try to build AIs that do what we want, or that don't quite do what we want, but not in dangerous ways, you know? Maybe they don't have long-term goals, or they don't know how to plan in the long term. They just know how to do things that require perception or intuition very well, but they don't have like a long-term agentic behavior. So I don't know, we could try to understand how the AI reasons, and this might be useful for many other things, and verify that it is not attempting to maximize long-term goals or disrupt its reasoning or something. We could double down on pointing to the concept that it says the AI should be friendly with data. That's the reinforcement learning from human feedback way. Or we could improve computer security so it can't hack its way out, and make restricted interaction with the world a lot. And all these things can help accent risk, but they cannot help misuse risk. Another thing you can do is, well, first you could not build AI, which might be good, but it also has lots of upsides, so people want to do it. And you could restrict proliferation of it unless it's like done in good ways and safe ways, and you could have democratic oversight on its use. And Guillem Bas is going to explain to y'all how we might do this. Thank you very much. That concludes my talk.
Thank you so much, Adrià. I'm sure that there'll be some questions for you later. Guillem, over to you.
Gràcies, Adrià, per la presentació. Gràcies a la Melanie i al Pablo per convidar-nos. Gràcies a Didac i a Adevinta per acollir-nos. So my presentation will be not about the technical side of AI, but about AI governance and the opportunities and challenges that it entails. Now, why am I working on AI governance? The way that I like to think about AI governance is that it's the field of AI that allows the people like me who's not so good at math, like Adrià, to actually have something to say in the field and to actually shape the development and deployment of this technology. So if you are like me and you were about to give up, don't worry, because there's still a place for us. The outline of the talk will be divided in these 4 sections. There's many more things to talk about, but I guess that the office has to close tonight, so I will just focus on these 4. Why should we care about AI governance? Hopefully you already care a bit about AI governance, because that was basically the title of the talk. Hopefully you didn't come just for the pizzas. The second one is I will provide the governance framework. I will present some of the most common ideas that are being discussed in literature, that are being discussed in policy proposals, reports, and even actual regulation. Third, I will talk about some of the obstacles that these kind of efforts have to face. And finally, we will cover international coordination, which is my personal interest, let's say like this. So why should we care about AI governance, right? Because we have come here to talk about the technology, AI. And as Adrià explained, this technology has some technical problems that require some technical solutions. So what am I doing here? Why am I coming here to talk about policy and to talk about governance? My main reasoning is that for those technical solutions to emerge, we need the right the right context that allows and that ensures that the development and deployment of this technology is carried out in a responsible, cautious, and safe way. And my other reason to come here is that I don't want these decisions to be made just by a few AI labs or by a few states. I want this discussion to be widened to the general public, and it should include definitely all the segments of society. So the purpose of this talk is basically empowering and informing all of you to hopefully at the end of the day be a bit more active in these discussions that I think that will be central in the political debate in the future years. Now, AI governance, as I said, encompasses many different things. Some of these things are or have been covered by Didac. We can talk about the socioeconomic impact. We can talk about fairness and privacy. We can talk about many other harms that we are already witnessing. But I will personally focus in this talk on what has been called frontier AI systems, which are these highly capable models that could possess dangerous capabilities sufficient to pose severe risks to public safety. Now, you can think about frontier AI systems as the cutting-edge, most advanced systems of the moment. And some examples of these current times are, of course, GPT-4, behind ChatGPT, Cloud, which by Anthropic, which is another similar language model, and also Palm 2 that was recently released by Google. Now, ideally, we want to have governance frameworks that address all of these technologies, which of course can have a huge positive impact on society, but also entails some risks, as we have seen. And there are currently many different ideas emerging every single week, honestly. If you want a frenetic, burgeoning field, enter into AI governance, because it will be full of emotions. Your career will be full of emotions, definitely. But I try to sum these ideas up into a framework that I completely made up. This RAC. I'm not talking about a radio channel. I'm also not talking about an insurance company. I'm talking about this report, assess, and control, which are three different categories that I think classify quite well some of the most common policies. Let's dive into it. Report. What do I mean by report? Here in report, I'm including all sorts of transparency measures that can help supervisory authorities, regulators, governments, as you want to call it, to help detect these frontier AI systems. And what is the reasoning behind this? It's that, at least currently, the development of these systems requires a very intensive use of resources. More specifically, it requires these three inputs that you are seeing on the screen: good algorithms, so basically good code behind the model, good model infrastructure, architecture that is defining the functionalities of that specific model. We need a lot of data, right? You know that deep learning systems are trained on huge amounts of data. And we also need compute. Now, what we mean by compute is this physical infrastructure on which the systems are trained. So basically, you can think about these huge data centers, huge supercomputers that allow precisely to connect this algorithm with the data and develop that particular model. Now, I want to focus on compute because I think it's particularly interesting for governance purposes for two main reasons. First, it's the most quantifiable of the three of them. In comparison to algorithms or data, for example, there are very clear metrics on how to measure this compute, and therefore we can compare between models. And it is also very traceable, right? Compute requires huge physical spaces and a lot of energy demand. So it's relatively easy to see where these systems are trained, who is training them, when, how, etc. And I believe that compute, as well as all the other ones, have a strong correlation with the capabilities of the model, so it can help detect these frontier AI systems. Now, of course, we don't want states to be detectives and go to check who is training what and where. Ideally, we would want to have probably these notification mechanisms in which maybe a developer is going to the regulator and saying, I have trained, or I am training, or I am planning to train this system with X compute. And ideally, we would want to have a threshold above which it is mandatory to notify this. And it is mandatory to go through a licensing process. So ideally, you don't want let's say a rogue actor, you don't want an irresponsible developer to have access to this compute. And therefore, this notification should be followed by a careful analysis of what is the record of that developer and what are the plans, and if those plans can actually entail some risks. Now, let's imagine that we have a system that has been reported, it has been licensed. Of course, we have to assess it continuously during the whole life cycle. We need measures that identify the risks continuously, and this identification should inform the efforts to eliminate as much as possible, or at least reduce and mitigate those risks. And some ways to do it, one of the most popular ones currently is model evaluations. Model evaluations basically involves having a group of people diving deep into the model and figuring out if that model has some dangerous capabilities. Some of the dangerous capabilities that evaluators are interested in are, for example, as the ones that Adria mentioned, self-replication, trying to self-replicate in other systems, or deceiving humans, which could also be potentially an important task to gain power. Another exercise that is very common is red teaming, and red teaming basically involves another group of people, another group of professionals that pretend to be the bad guys. And these people are simulating attacks on the system. This is very common also in cybersecurity to identify vulnerabilities in an organization. And what we are doing here in this case for AI system is identifying if the system has an inclination to output undesired results. So for example, GPT-4 went through a red teaming exercise in which OpenAI gathered several professionals from many different fields, biotechnology, nuclear safety, economics, communication, etc. And they would tell them, for example, they would tell the biotechnology professionals, I want you to try to make GPT-4 tell you how to develop a new pathogen and how to integrate that pathogen in a biological weapon, for example. Of course, you don't want a system like this to tell you that so easily. So if that was the case and GPT-4 was providing information, it would have been adjusted. Finally, we have risk management systems. This is not a specific policy, but of course, model evaluations and red teaming have to be integrated in very clear standards on which efforts are necessary to identify all the potential risks that we can foresee, and put in place the technical solutions that we need to reduce that risk to, let's say, an acceptable level. And if that is not possible, of course, we shouldn't develop the system, or if it's already developed, we shouldn't deploy it. This is quite obvious, but it's still not in place. Oops. Now, let's imagine that we have a reported, licensed, assessed system, and we want to deploy it. The story doesn't end here. Of course, we want to control the system during the whole period of use. We want oversight of this post-deployment phase to avoid any incidents, to avoid, for example, misuse, or to avoid that someone is trying to steal the model. Somebody is trying to reproduce the model, maybe with malicious intentions. So, of course, you want monitoring. For example, AI labs can check that no one is trying to hack the API, or no one is making a bad use of the instructions of the model. And if that's the case, if there is actually an incident, you want AI labs to be able to intervene in that. So, for example, to restrict the access to the API, or if it's the case, even switching off the model. Even if switching of the model is more complicated than it seems, probably Adria could provide us more information about this. But you want to make sure that if there is harm actually being caused, you can stop it right away. Now, probably, if I was convincing enough, some of these policies made sense. Some of these policies were sensible, and you might be asking why you're not implementing them. Well, there are many obstacles to AI governance that we have to take into account, and in my opinion, one of the most important one is what I like to call competitive pressures. Basically, it's very, very tempting for all sorts of actors to rush in the development and deployment of AI. And here we have this diagram, both private, so for example, AI labs, and states, public actors, really want to develop and deploy AI fast. One example is private developers. Who doesn't want to make history, right? For many of these labs, it is an incredible goal to one day develop artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence. And therefore, they might be tempted to maybe skimp on safety in order to accelerate innovation and arrive there before their rivals. First, for material reasons, developing that technology would allow them to leverage it and potentially gain unequal power. And then for symbolic reasons, who doesn't want to be in potentially the most important page in human history, in history books, even if maybe humans are never able to read that page. Now, of course, developing AI wouldn't be so tempting if it wasn't also tempting to deploy it fast. Who doesn't want to be 100 times faster and better? Which company doesn't want to be 100 times more productive, even if it's in a safe way? I know that Adevinta is not the case, but some companies might be tempted to do so. Which scientist doesn't want to discover things 100 times faster and allow these breakthroughs at an unprecedented scale? Or which individuals like you and me don't want to have an easier life, an easier daily life, right? We have all these sort of tools like ChatGPT that are making things easier, but it seems like we are wanting more and more. Because if you realize ChatGPT was released a bit more than half a year ago, and it was like a huge shock for the whole of society, now we are not surprised anymore. And now it seems like people want more. ChatGPT is getting dumber. I want GPT-5, I want GPT-6, I want GPT-7. And we are also sometimes pushing for this to go faster and faster, even if the reality is that AI development is right now at a crazy pace. There are breakthroughs every single week, and therefore it's definitely not stopped. Now, the problems that I mentioned could be assessed through regulation, right? States can come in the way and say, you have to slow down, and we have to put in place some policies like the ones that I have mentioned. What happens? That states are also affected by these competitive pressures. Who doesn't want to rule the world, right? This refers to a quote by Putin in 2017, which said that the country that develops transformative artificial intelligence first will rule the world. And I think that if that country actually succeeds in developing beneficial AI, he might be right. And therefore, even if states themselves don't develop AI, I think that they will become increasingly involved, but that's not the case for now. But even if that's the case, they might put in place laxer regulations to sort of push their national champions in skimping on safety, once again, allowing them to skimp on safety in order to accelerate innovation and reach the final goal first. And I think that this can be exacerbated by geopolitical dynamics like the competition that we are seeing between the United States and China. Once again, states also want to deploy AI fast, because who doesn't want an automated state? I don't want an automated state, but some states might want to automate theirs. Maybe they want to automate decision-making, and in fields like the military field, where time is so important, it can provide them a huge advantage, but obviously many risks too. And maybe they can leave behind these costly, weak, human-based armies and convert them into these armies of literal autonomous weapons, even if, once again, this would entail huge risks. So what is the solution for this? There isn't actually a clear solution. Here we have to be much more innovative and find new creative ways. But one of the ways that we could do it is through international coordination. Now, international coordination is very hard, but I'm quite optimistic about it because there are many initiatives currently that look quite promising. One of them is the European Union AI Act, which Didac already mentioned, and it will be probably the first great regulatory framework for a big jurisdiction. And because of the influence of the European Union it will probably have a great impact on the whole world. We also have the G7, these 7 countries discussing on AI through the so-called Hiroshima processes. They have met several times to address the topic, and potentially this could lead to some actual agreements. We have the UK recently expressing concerns about the potential existential threat posed by AI. And what they did is they announced that they will host the first global summit on AI at the end of this year, where they will gather some of the most relevant actors globally, and this could also be a huge step. We have the United Nations Security Council debating for the first time ever on AI just last week. And we also have organizations like UNESCO or OECD, which have their own AI offices, and they have published recommendations, they have published reports on AI policy and ethics, which could also lead to international agreements, actual international agreements between states that set some principles and some standards. Now, maybe you want states to sit down and say, okay, these are our common values, these are our common interests, and therefore we need to establish some standards to protect them. And some of these standards could be, for example, states must enact and enforce regulation, including some of the policies that we have addressed, for example. There are some more abstract talks, which, like, for example, slowing down AI. Now, maybe you remember an open letter by Future of Life Institute, which said all AI development above the capabilities of GPT-4 should be stopped. There should be a moratorium for at least 6 months. This would be an example of slowing down, like making sure that everybody is stopping and trying to figure out if we can find some solutions before this accelerates even more. We can have some more nuanced approaches, like establishing a threshold of compute, for example, that developers cannot surpass at a particular year. And finally, we can have joining forces. There are proposals that say states should, for example, commit to contribute to a common fund. They should commit a percentage of their budget to a common fund that should finance, for example, attracting talent and gathering resources to solve some open problems in AI safety. And we want to make sure that everyone in the world is working on these problems together. Now, of course, these international agreements are wet paper if there's no one to enforce it. And once again, in international relations, it's quite hard. The first lesson that you learn in an international relations school is that the international system is anarchical. There's no one above the state that can impose absolutely anything on these states. So once again, we have to find innovative solutions. One of them could be what I call peer incentive, right? You can have states punishing each other for not being responsible enough, right? We have seen this a lot in other fields. We have, for example, economic sanctions, like the ones that have been imposed to Russia in the context of the war against Ukraine. And we actually have also this kind of punishment in the field of AI, right? We have the US restricting exportations of chips, semiconductors, these components that allow the development of AI, and specifically just the ones that allow the development of AI. They are restricting the exportation of these chips to China behind or based on the rationale that these cutting-edge chips are being used to develop AI systems that are later used by the Chinese military. So we could have something like this to sort of punish the states that are non-compliant with the agreements. Now, ideally, we don't want to depend just on these peer incentives. We want some institutional mechanisms. And what could these institutional mechanisms look like? Well, some people are talking about something like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, which is based on this slogan, Atoms for Peace. And it basically supervises that all national nuclear programs are dedicated to non-offensive purposes. So if someone is trying to basically develop nuclear weapons and they are not supposed to do so, this institution has the capacity to enforce punishment. This could be an option. Another option that is being discussed is, for example, CERN, which is a European organization, but it also has global, let's say, it also has global influence. And this CERN is basically precisely joining forces in the field of nuclear safety. So you have you have a lot of talent and a lot of resources concentrated in one place, and there are many people that are trying to solve some open problems in nuclear safety. This could be another solution to enforce the international agreements on, for example, joining forces. Now, to conclude, why do I think that, once again, let's come back to the first question, why should we care about AI governance? I think that we should care about AI governance because it's extremely important. It's probably one of the most important problems of our time. It's still open. Everything that I told you now is still open to discussion. I didn't come here to teach any lesson, but to incentivize debate. And definitely not all experts agree on everything, and there's still a lot of ideas to come. So I think that it's useful to open this discussion and incentivize it, and it's very urgent. We cannot really wait to see if we can find the perfect solution or anything like that. Of course, we don't want to do whatever comes to mind, but we need to be dedicating a lot of resources to this problem. So I think that these three elements are definitely a good reason to focus on AI governance, whether directly or indirectly through citizenship and citizen participation. Now, this is me. If you want to tell me anything, you have here my email, and also you can connect to my LinkedIn. Here you will find, for example, some of my recent work at Riesgos Catastróficos Globales. We have published a report on AI governance in Spain in the context of the EU AI Act, and there you can learn more about some of the risks, some of these policies in general, and in the context of this incoming regulation. So thank you very much for listening, and I will give the word to Roman.
Thank you so much, Guillem. Great presentation. So we're going to open the floor for Q&A. I hope there's some questions buzzing around in your head. First, we're going to go to Martin, who's in Prague, and he's going to give his reflection on some of the themes raised by Guillem and Adrià. And then the Q&A will continue for you guys. So as soon as Martin's face appears.
Yeah, hello.
We hear your voice, we just don't see your face yet. There you are.
Okay. Hi, yeah, here I am.
Vale.
So, yeah, thanks, Mel, and thank you, Guillem, for such a brilliant talk. I wanted to kick this off by mentioning, like, our audience will certainly be aware that AI safety has received way more attention recently in the public eye. This has been actually flabbergasting to experience from the inside of the research field because, you know, like some effective altruists were already worried about these issues more than a decade ago. Back then, the field was like maybe 20 researchers, like some crazy low number. And in fact, way back then, these worries, such real worries about the risks posed by advanced systems, were even mocked by some academic circles. And actually, some well-reputed academic figures were afraid to publicly talk about, you know, the possible risks from AI. Luckily, more recently, and of course, given the severe growth in capabilities of these systems, the debate has widely opened, and, you know, even in the academic field, people are engaging with their whole heart into this discussion, which is super positive, and also the very respected figures like the godfathers of AI are doing this. But maybe surprisingly, some figures still are very confident about the non-existence of these risks despite the evidence that we are obtaining. So, for example, Jan LeCun, the chief scientist of Meta AI, is still very skeptical of the risks. And that made me think, like, I was expecting, academic debate on this topic of AI risks to kind of converge on a moderate view of, like we should be conservative, we should take these risks seriously, because of course the downsides are way too big to not treat seriously. But I was wondering, what if a side of the academic debate gets entrenched? What if, for example, Jan LeCun doesn't get convinced and Meta AI keeps pushing forward? So I wanted to pose to Guillem the question also of how reliant are these different ideas for the future governance of AI? How reliant are they on academia and the experts reaching a clear consensus? Like, how will the future look like, and which things could go through and which couldn't, if there's still an open schism inside academia, like in some circles is still happening about this topic? Because also the AI risk problem has a nature that some people call the unilateralists curse, which means even if everyone were convinced of the seriousness of the risks, if only Meta AI pushed forward without having any recognition of these risks, they could endanger all of us, so to speak. So, which methods of governance rely on an expert consensus? What could we do if this is not the case? Is the question I'd like to pose to Guillem.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Guillem, you can sit here.
That's a great question. Thank you for putting down my whole presentation. No, I think it's a very important question, and it's true that I don't think we will ever find expert consensus on this issue. Probably it's impossible. And there's actually a huge problem with, let's say, catastrophic risks or existential risks from AI, which is that we can have some intuition, but we will never have empirical evidence, right? Because if there was empirical evidence, we would all be dead. So we will never be able to prove that AI actually poses an existential threat. Probably some experts will not agree that it's actually so bad. Maybe they won't agree until there's not a huge catastrophe or an existential catastrophe, but what has been called an Oppenheimer moment, right? Or this, now that Oppenheimer was released, this big incident that makes some people take the issue seriously. I think that, for example, the release of GPT-4, even if it didn't pose any significant risk, has already raised concerns by many people that weren't thinking about this before. So I think that what is up to us is trying to communicate as much as possible, as well as possible, these potential risks. Not to achieve a global consensus, because that's probably impossible, but at least to convince the relevant actors, for example, the main states, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, etc., that some regulation is needed to address these risks. And actually, I don't think that, because we are usually making this artificial division between extreme risks and some of the near-term, more visible harms. And I don't think that this division is actually so clear. I think that some of the policies that I presented today are also useful to address near-term harms or harms that are already happening. So we want to find a balance, and we want to integrate all opinions from skepticist people and also people that are convinced about these risks, and ideally, find the minimum at least that we can enact and enforce. And I would say to finish my response, that we want to. I'm not convinced. I think that the potential for an existential catastrophe from AI is maybe relatively low. I don't think that it's very, very likely, but it's just the possibility that it can happen should already push us to adopt the precautionary principle and say, okay, let's be cautious. As I said, let's be responsible, let's be safe, let's be cautious, just in case. right? So that's what I would tell them. Hopefully it works. I know that many people are starting to buy this idea, so we just have to continue this work.
Okay, thank you for your response. Martin, just stay there for now. Adrià had to drop off the call for a few minutes, but he's going to be back. So for now, any questions directed to Guillem or Martin from the audience? Anybody got a question? Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. They were super interesting. So you really mentioned that. I'm curious about your thoughts regarding the current controversies around like people who have researched the topic for years, usually coming from discriminative groups of segments of the population, and therefore already impacted by the current or past risks about machine learning and AI, mainly related to bias and automated discrimination. And from their side, they are usually criticizing like all this part about existential and potential risk, because in a way they see that, or they feel like it's distracting from the real risks that are currently happening and impacting like all these people, mainly because of this automated discrimination. So yeah, I wonder like a bit your opinion on that, and whether you see, like you mentioned this, right? Like you see a bit like the relationship, but it's true that there is like an ongoing hype about this AGI and the potential risk in the future about this super intelligence, and maybe we're losing a bit the relevancy also about the current and existent and happening risk of ML right now.
Yeah, sure. Once again, I think they are compatible. Addressing and focusing on, let's say, near-term and long-term risks is compatible. I think some of the solutions are common for both of them. And I don't think that we have to decide on focusing on these near-term or long-term risks. Actually, if I'm being honest, 1 year ago, there were many more people thinking about AI ethics, thinking about bias, discrimination, thinking about the socioeconomic impacts. Nobody besides, as Martin said, besides just a few people were thinking about more extreme risks. I think that's still the case. Even there is more attention to those catastrophic risks. It's still the case that there are many people thinking about, let's say, ethical risks, if you want to put it like that. Obviously, it's still not solved. There are still important problems to address. But once again, it's not incompatible. And because you mentioned this kind of criticism, it's also the case that some people are saying, well, talking about catastrophic risks is basically generating panic, which is what the major AI labs want you to feel, right? Well, I don't care. Like, I don't care agreeing with whatever actor if I believe that those ideas are important to address. I don't know what their motivations are, but for these purposes, I also don't care, because if it's something that is actually important, I think that we should be talking about this. So yes, in regards to those criticisms, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you for your speeches. They were great. I was wondering, why is consensus and regulation still not happening? Like, which are the topics that we are not agreeing on, and which are the main stakeholders that are not coming to the main consensus to say something? Yeah.
I would say it's a matter of time. We haven't had time to actually discuss. Like, some of the initiatives that I mentioned are very recent. Some of them were last week or last month. One of the most important initiatives, the regulation from the European Union, is still not approved, and it was started 2 years ago. It is needing some adaptations, precisely to readjust the text to these new realities and these potential new risks. So it's not necessarily about not agreeing, but about time. And one of the problems is that maybe we don't have that much time. Usually these kind of applications are very slow and take a lot of time, especially for such important topics, of course. And probably the main obstacle will be this time. We can also have obstacles to actual consensus. Some actors might not agree, as Martin said. There are some labs approach the topic in very different ways, and therefore we might not have some of the most stringent policies because of the rejection of some of these actors. But I think it's too early to draw conclusions because the talks have just started, and we don't really know, besides time, what's the actual obstacle, in my opinion.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions more. Anyone interested?
By the way, Adria has come back. So-
Adria came back, if anyone wants a question for him. There's one at the back, Pablo. Very soon you'll start eating the pizzas, don't worry.
That's a quick question, I think, but I don't know how long the answer is, because you quickly mentioned like shutting off is really in most cases not an option, because you were talking about a lot of things that you can control and assess before actually something goes wrong, obviously, when we're talking about existential risks. But then could you maybe, in a few quick words, say what are the challenges in shutting off a system that has gone wrong, you know?
Would Adria like to respond?
Yes, I
Sure.
I guess I
Thanks.
will respond much better.
I mean, it's trying to prevent you from shutting it off, basically. That's the main issue. And wait, there's 2 Martins on the screen. That's okay. Yeah, it's just trying you to prevent it from shutting it off by like defending the button or like I don't know, it's not just a question of plugging the cable, you know, especially if it's like a massive data center running the thing or there's many copies running it. So like, I don't know, you would need to plug many buttons, and then like, it's also indeed trying you to prevent from shutting it off. So like it may persuade other people to disagree with you so that you can't do that. Or if the button, whatever, is implemented as a request that gets sent to a server to shut it down, it may have hacked the server so that it doesn't do that anymore. So there are actually many complications. I guess like if you indeed like don't let it persuade anyone by like not actually using the AI and it's just in a single computer that's plugged to the wall, sure, you can pull the plug. But that's not what's actually going to happen. It's going to be in a massive data center with redundant power and maybe be copied to other places of the internet. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Martin has a...
Yeah, if I can jump in on this as well, because I know, you know, from an outside perspective, these worries always the first times they sound very sci-fi, or also like we are maybe anthropomorphizing the AIs, like they will have, you know, a self-preservation objective, just like people don't want to die and so on. But actually, if we look at the broader trajectory of the technological development, this makes complete sense, right? Because there are a lot of economic incentives for these systems to be each generation to have a better understanding of the world, to be able to perform better reasoning, because in this way we'll be able to, you know, automate a lot more stuff, as Adrián and Guillem have mentioned, and this is what provides the economic feedback at the end of the day. So when systems obtain better and better understanding of their surroundings, there will arrive a point where, you know, they have better understanding that maybe they're human supervisors, or they perfectly understand that they are an AI being trained or an AI being deployed in the world, because this is a useful fact to know about the world and understand the world and increase the benefits of a company or whatever the creators want the AI to do. And, you know, in these cases, given some goal that the AI might have, the chain of logical reasoning will notice that self-preservation is really important for the AI to actually achieve this goal, and many other convergent instrumental goals that could be a worry for humanity.
Thank you so much. Did you want to add one more thing, or do you think I covered it?
I would add that you cannot make coffee if you are dead, which is Russel's quote. Basically, even the simplest coffee machine, for example, wouldn't be able to pursue its goal if it was off. So imagine with a very, very advanced AI.
Perhaps one more question, then we might close the floor. Angelo.
Hi, so I'm a researcher studying the open sourcing of these models and like the benefits of this. So in your opinion, is it a net benefit to open source these models, or are you like for, prohibiting the use of such and like the deployment of such models?
Big question. Who wants to
Very difficult question.
take it?
I'll take it. I'll be brave.
Adria, can you first summarize the question?
Yes. Okay. So the question, as far as I understand it, is a net benefit? Is it a net benefit to open source all these large language models? I'm not actually sure. So what I do know is that at some point we should stop, I think, to open source all these models, and maybe to even make them in the first place, precisely because it makes it very hard to enforce governance and restrict proliferation, and there are serious misuse and accident concerns. I don't know, but like the ones that we have now seem okay, seem probably not good. In fact, like if we stopped here, but I don't know about the precedent that they set. That's my view.
Anyone else want to add anything, or shall we move on?
I agree. I think that we should be increasingly careful with open sourcing models. Ideally, you don't want absolutely anyone to access this kind of information, and especially if that relation that I mentioned between compute and capabilities lowers down. Like now you need a lot of resources to actually develop an actual model, but we're not sure that this will continue to be the case in the future. So you want to be very, very careful of who accesses these frontier AI systems, the same way that you want to be very careful about who accesses sensitive information from nuclear programs, from biotechnology programs, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that they, of course, have enormous benefits, but we have to be increasingly careful with them.
Okay, I think we're probably going to, unless there's a really urgent question, I think we're going to officially close the Q&A. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to Adevinta. And it's been a really interesting event. There's one more thing I'm going to ask you to do, because I'm very evil. Before we consume some pizzas and drinks, would you be so kind as to take 1 minute to complete a survey? It just helps us to get feedback on the event, what went well, what we can improve. We really appreciate that. It's optional, but it's appreciated. So yeah, please do the survey, and then you can feel free to head on out for pizzas and everything. Now's the time to clap, apparently. Please clap.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.